Alright people, FK here, hope you're well. So another behind the shot video. If you like these videos and they're useful, hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and I will keep making them. Right, let's get straight into it and start off with the set. So the aim of this shoot was to go for something that had a natural feel. I do like using flowers and plants and anything that's quite organic. It's just something I like to incorporate if the shoot allows it. So here we go, let's start with the backdrop. So this backdrop here is quite simply a large canvas hand-painted backdrop which has been reversed, and I'm actually using the back side. The front side is actually a blue kind of a textured wall type surface. It's the Emily Soto backdrop Eleanor, which I purchased from Seamless Photograph. All I've done is flip the backdrop round, so we're using the raw canvas from behind, and this is what it looks like. So we've got this large backdrop, and I'll just quickly draw out a lighting diagram at the same time. So this is our backdrop, and you'll notice it's sweeping down here, and then it's coming onto the floor, and it's actually reaching out just to about here. That's the end of the backdrop. So if I just draw this in, that's how big the backdrop actually is. It's not very long. It's quite wide and quite tall, but it doesn't come out very long. It doesn't have a lot of length. Now I need both background, midground, and foreground space within this set because I want to create the feeling of depth and dimension, and I also want to use depth of field, i.e. I want these bushes in the background and in the foreground to be out of focus, and that again creates that little element of interest and dimension. So I need to extend the set out. So what I've got here is I've got a second smaller backdrop. This is a gravity backdrop. In fact, I will do that in another color just so it makes it a little bit clearer. We've got a gravity backdrop on the floor again, reverse side, and it's kind of like this going underneath. And then I've got another gravity backdrop which is sitting around about here, like so. Okay, so I've actually got 1, 2, 3 backdrops which are all sat on the floor, reverse side, and that's creating a extended set, you could say. So I've got here, and then I've also got one that kind of comes out here, right? So I've got the width and now I've got the length, and they're all reverse side. So a very cheap option is you could just go buy any kind of material, decorators cloth which they put over furniture to protect that from paint. You could use that. That would be a really good a good option, and a lot cheaper. You could just find some rags, loose material, whatever it is, you can kind of piece it together. So that's it in terms of the actual backdrop surface and the floor surface. Now you'll notice we've got these dried plants. Well, they're not actually plants, they are leaves off a palm tree, and they've dried out, and I've just obviously collected them and I've put them away hoping I might be able to use them sometime, and this was the time. And they're just stood up in these cardboard tubes in order for them to stay upright. So we've got some more here, and obviously we've got some more in the foreground. And then in front of these we've also got these little pieces of wood. They are almost like firewood, and I've just leaned those up against the tubes so you kind of hide the tubes a little bit, and that just creates almost like a root out of which we've got these grasses. Now on the floor you'll notice, and I'll just pop those back in. Let's just put those in. Let's give those a blue color. Okay, you've got these blue here, 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 and here. And in terms of where they are, you've got one here, we've got one about here, and we've got one around here. Okay, so we've got our grasses, and obviously we've got our backdrop. Now on the floor, we've also got some leaves, which have just been taken from the garden, and they're just sprinkled around all over the floor, so as to create a little bit more of a natural organic feel, almost like there's a bit of a clearing, and they just dotted around randomly all over the floor. And that's it in terms of the set. It's pretty straightforward, and you'll notice Later on, the reason why I've staggered these, it'll become apparent when we start looking at the actual photographs. So that's the set. Let's go into the lighting. Okay, so for the lighting, I wanted something soft, even, but also broad enough to illuminate the entire set from foreground through to background. So I knew straight away I needed a large light source, and I started off with this unit here. This is a Elinchrom BRX 500i, and we are modifying it with this wonderful deep Octa box, right? And these Octas from Elinchrom are absolutely brilliant. You've got a diffusion panel on the inside, so the light hits that first. That will spread the light, reduce the hotspot, and then we come out to this outer diffusion panel, and it gives us beautiful soft light. It's a fantastic modifier. So this is the large Octa, and that's on the Elinchrom BRX 500i. Now, if you look at the light angle itself, it's not a full 45 degrees pointing down. It's a little bit less than that. And the bottom of the light is approximately chin level on the model. So this is our main light, and it's not pointing directly at the model either. So if I am to draw this here, so let me just put the model in. We'll assume the model is stood around about here. Let's say I am around about here. So the first light source, which is camera left, you're actually seeing the model view here. So if you're getting a little bit confused, this is camera model right, but camera left. So the light is actually around about here, like so. This is the light head. This is the large modifier. And the middle of the light is not pointing at the model. I always ensure that the middle of the light is pointing in front of the model. This is going to allow us to get a softer pool of light, because the edges of the light are generally going to be that little bit more softer. This is because the bulb itself, the flash tube, is right in the middle. That's going to create a hot spot. Even though the diffusion panel inside minimizes the hot spot, you will still find to the edges you get a softer light source. So the light is coming out and it's illuminating it this way, and we are brushing past her face here. Let's say that's her nose. We're brushing past, we're giving a beautiful light source. Now I also wanted to balance that out with the left-hand side of the model, or camera right. So to do that, I've used this light, which is again one of my wonderful large modifiers that I very much love. This is a 7-foot Westcott silver parabolic umbrella, right? So we've got silver on the inside, and then we've got the white diffusion material on the outside. So rather than shooting through, in this instance, it's shooting away but reflecting back. And again, it's a big modifier. Now, if you look at the actual light head and the middle of the light, it is nowhere near pointing towards the model. So let me just draw that over here. So the way this was placed was it's kind of placed around about here, and the middle of the light is again going past the model, and it's actually pointed down. This is something that you really need to be aware of. It's not pointing at the model. So if the model is stood looking at the lights, she's not seeing the full face of the light. She's not seeing the light as a circle. She's actually seeing the light as an ellipse. Okay, so it's actually angled away from her. It's pointing down to the floor. And you might be wondering, well, why am I doing that? Well, the reason is fairly straightforward. By pointing it down at the floor and not showing the model the full face of the light, what is actually happening is I'm giving her clothing more of the light from head to toe. So I'm actually pointing down, which means I'm turning the angle of the light more down towards the floor, which is going to allow the light to hit the model's midriff all the way down her legs, right down to her feet. And this is very important, especially if you're going to be lighting full length and you want to make sure you've got all the detail in the model's clothing. So the angle of the light is pointing down, and that's allowing us to not only fill the opposite side of the key light in terms of the shadows and soften that, but it's also giving us a wonderful soft exposure all the way down the model, all the way down to the feet. And also, with it being a big broad light source, the light is spreading out, and all of this light from the key and the fill light is also reaching the backdrop, which is also illuminating the backdrop and giving us a really nice exposure right there. So it's a 2-light setup, 2 large lights, one on the left, one on the right, both feathered away from the model, one pointed more down towards the floor, whilst the other one is pointed more towards the opposite side of the model. And this is giving us a wonderful dual light, soft, very soft light, but very even light across the entire set. Okay, now let's quickly go towards camera settings and the gear that I used for this shoot. So we used the Canon 5D Mark III with the 24-72.8L Mark I. That was used because I needed to get 3/4 length, full body, and also some wider landscape type shots. So essentially we shot at 160, f5.6, ISO 100, and I also shot some video as well on the GH4 in 1080p at 60 frames per second. And in order to light the model and light the set itself, we used 2 Genaray LED lights, but they were pointing actually at the modifiers. They were pointing at the diffusion material and acting like big bounce lights, which again illuminated the model from head to toe. So rather than adding extra modifiers on the LED lights and bringing them to the front and cramming the area, we just simply bounced them off the current modifiers that were used. And editing was very, very straightforward. Again, I always try and ensure that my lighting and the way I kind of compose the images is as close to how I want to see it in the final rendition. Get it right in camera, then there's less to do in post. And in terms of post-processing, it was bringing down the saturation overall, adding a little bit of sharpening, adding a little bit of extra contrast, and taking the reds out of the skin as to create a little bit more of a paler skin tone. And that literally was it. Anyway, have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.